Call it whatever you want. Betrayal is still betrayal.
I was going through some quarterly reports at my desk when Jennifer's name flashed on my phone screen. She'd been away for 3 days at some corporate training event in Phoenix, and I figured she was calling to tell me about her day. I answered on the second ring, asking how things were going. There was a pause. Not the comfortable kind we usually had, but something heavier hanging in the air. Then she said those 4 words nobody ever wants to hear. We need to talk. I put down my pen and leaned back in my chair, telling her to go ahead. Another pause, and I could hear typical hotel sounds in the background. Elevator chimes, people chatting in corridors. Then she dropped it on me. She'd met someone there at the conference. They'd been spending time together, talking, getting close. I asked her to clarify what she meant by met someone. She explained they'd been spending time together, talking about everything. It was complicated, she said. I almost laughed at that word. How complicated could it possibly be? That's when she used the term, situationship. Like that single word explained everything and made it all acceptable in the situationship. I had to process that for a second. Here I was under the impression we were married with actual vows and everything, and apparently we were just in some undefined gray area that gave her room to accommodate a conference romance. I asked if she understood we were married. She said quickly that it wasn't that simple. These things happen, feelings develop, and she couldn't control how she felt about another person. I stood up and walked to my window, watching people outside living their regular lives, completely unaware that my entire marriage was falling apart over a phone call. I asked her to clarify. She'd met someone 3 days ago, and now she was in a relationship with them while still married to me. She corrected me, saying it wasn't exactly a relationship. It was more fluid than that. They were exploring what this could become. Fluid. Exploring. The words sounded like they belonged in some self-help book, not in a conversation with the woman I'd been married to for 6 years. I asked why she was calling to tell me this. She said she believed in honesty and didn't want to lie to me. The irony wasn't lost on me. She didn't want to lie, but apparently betrayal was fine as long as it had a trendy label attached to it. I told her how considerate that was, and she snapped at me not to be sarcastic. This was hard for her, too. Hard for her, right. I was sure it was incredibly difficult having romantic dinners in Phoenix while I was home handling our bills and wondering why she hadn't bothered to call the day before. I asked what happened next. She said she didn't know. She needed time to figure things out to see where this might lead. I clarified that she wanted to do this while remaining married to me. She said she wasn't asking me to make any decisions right now. She just wanted me to know what was happening. I looked at our wedding photos sitting on my desk. 2 people who thought they understood what forever actually meant. I told her I appreciated the heads up. She said she'd be home tomorrow evening, and we could talk more then, figure out how to handle this situation, handle this. Like it was a scheduling conflict instead of her actively choosing someone else over me. I said sure, we'd talk when she got back. She said softly that she loved me, that this didn't change that. I hung up without responding to that statement. I sat back down at my desk and stared at the quarterly reports I'd been working on. Suddenly, they seemed completely meaningless. My phone buzzed with a text message from her, but I didn't look at it. Instead, I opened my laptop and started searching for divorce attorneys in my area. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Not because I was actually ill, but because I had more pressing matters to deal with. I'd spent half the night researching divorce lawyers, and the other half thinking about how someone throws away 6 years of marriage for a 3-day conference fling. By 9 in the morning, I was sitting in the office of Robert Hayes, a divorce attorney whose reviews had been solid and who, more importantly, was available immediately. He looked over the notes I'd written down and asked about this situationship she'd told me about. I explained that's what she called it. Apparently, it meant she could have everything she wanted without consequences. Robert nodded like he'd seen this pattern before. People use modern terminology to make traditional cheating sound progressive and acceptable, he said. He leaned forward and told me the good news. If I wanted to move forward with this, we could have paperwork ready by tomorrow. That quickly? I asked. He explained that infidelity is infidelity regardless of what someone calls it. And she'd confessed to it voluntarily, which made the process much easier. I signed the retainer agreement and walked out of his office with a concrete plan. The papers would be ready by 5 the next afternoon, perfect timing for when she arrived home. My next stop was the bank. I withdrew enough cash to cover immediate expenses and opened a separate account in just my name. Everything legal and documented. I wasn't trying to hide assets or play games, just protecting myself from any surprises she might have planned. Then I called my friend Tyler Morrison. He picked up on the first ring saying he hadn't heard from me in a while and asking what was going on. I told him I needed a favor. Could he help me move some boxes tomorrow evening? Moving boxes? He sounded confused. Were Jennifer and I buying a new place? Not exactly, I said. I'd explain when I saw him. That afternoon, I went through her social media profiles carefully. She'd posted several pictures from the conference, and there he was in multiple photos, standing close to her, his hand on her lower back, both of them looking incredibly comfortable together. The comments from her colleagues were revealing. Lots of heart emojis, comments saying, "You two are so cute together," and similar messages. I took screenshots of everything. Robert had mentioned that documentation would be helpful, though with her confession, it was probably unnecessary. By evening, I had everything organized. Fresh sheets on the guest bedroom, her suitcase pulled down from the closet, and a mental inventory of which items were definitely hers. I even ordered moving boxes online, with expedited deliveries scheduled for the next day. My phone had been buzzing constantly, with texts from her throughout the day. Updates about conference sessions, photos of her meals, little messages that felt like she was trying to maintain some sense of normalcy while simultaneously destroying our marriage. I responded just enough to seem normal. Sounds good. Nice picture. Have fun. The last text came around 10 at night. She said she couldn't wait to see me tomorrow and that she missed me. I set the phone aside without responding. She missed me while exploring a fluid relationship with conference guy? The audacity was almost impressive in a way. I spent the evening researching our joint accounts, making absolutely sure I understood exactly what needed to be separated. Credit cards, streaming services, insurance policies. Marriage creates numerous financial connections that need to be carefully untangled. Around midnight, I found myself looking at our wedding album, not from nostalgia, but trying to figure out when things had actually changed. When did the woman who promised to love me through everything decide that promises could be fluid too? I closed the album and put it in a box with her name written on it. Tomorrow evening was going to be very interesting indeed. The next day moved like a perfectly choreographed operation. Robert called at 4 in the afternoon. The papers were ready. Did I want to pick them up or should he deliver them? I said I'd come get them. I drove to his office and reviewed everything twice. Petition for dissolution of marriage, financial disclosures, temporary restraining orders on joint accounts. Everything we'd discussed. Clean, thorough, and absolutely final. Robert asked if I was sure about this as I signed where he indicated. I told him she'd made her choice 3 days ago. I was just making mine official now. By 5:30, Tyler arrived with his truck. I'd already pulled out all the boxes and had most of her belongings sorted and organized. Her clothes, personal items, books, that expensive coffee maker her sister had given her last Christmas. Everything that was distinctly hers. Tyler said the boxes were heavy as he lifted one full of her shoe collection. He asked if I wanted to tell him what happened. I explained that she'd decided our marriage wasn't exclusive enough for her preferences. Tyler stopped mid-lift and asked if I was serious. I told him she'd called me the day before from Phoenix. Apparently, she was in a situationship with someone from her conference. Tyler asked what my reaction was, and we kept working efficiently. He didn't ask too many questions after that, which I appreciated. By 7, everything was packed and stacked neatly by the front door. Her suitcase sat on top of the pile, ready for immediate departure. I changed the locks while Tyler went to grab us some dinner. Simple deadbolt replacement that took about 20 minutes. I wasn't locking her out permanently, just ensuring she couldn't walk in like nothing had changed. Tyler said she was going to lose it when she saw everything as we ate. I agreed that was probably true. But that's what happens when you blow up your own life and expect everyone else to deal with the fallout. Around 8, I got a text message. She was landing in 30 minutes and couldn't wait to be home. Home. Interesting word choice for someone who'd been exploring other options. I responded that I'd see her soon. Tyler left around 8:30 after helping me move a few furniture pieces to fill the spaces where her things had been. The house looked different, but not empty. More like it had been edited and streamlined. At 9:15, I heard a car pulling into the driveway. I sat at the kitchen table with the divorce papers positioned in front of me and waited. She tried her key first. I heard the confusion when it didn't work, then the sound of her trying it again. After about a minute, she knocked on the door. I opened it and stepped aside. She looked tired from traveling, but smiled when she saw me. She said her key wasn't working and asked if something had happened with the lock. That's when she noticed the boxes stacked by the door. Her smile disappeared as she looked from the boxes to the papers on the table, then back to me. She asked what all this was. I told her simply that it was her things. She walked over to the table and looked at the documents more closely. She read aloud, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." She looked up at me in shock. "I'd filed for divorce yesterday," I confirmed, right after our conversation. But she'd said we needed to talk, to figure this out together. I told her she'd figured it out in Phoenix. I was just catching up with the situation. She sat down heavily in the chair across from me. This wasn't what she wanted, she said. I asked what exactly she had wanted. To keep me on standby while she explored her situationship? She insisted it wasn't like that. I told her to explain it to me then. Use small words so I could understand how being married to me while romantically involved with someone else wasn't exactly like that. She was quiet for a long moment before saying she'd thought I'd be more understanding. Understanding of what? That she'd met someone and decided our marriage vows were more like flexible guidelines. She said people grow apart. Feelings change. She was trying to be honest with me about what was happening. I pointed out that Honest would have been talking to me before she started her romance novel in Phoenix. What she'd done was notification, not honesty. She looked around the room, really seeing all the changes for the first time. She asked if I'd packed everything. I confirmed I'd packed everything that belonged to her. I'd been very careful to make sure I didn't take anything that was hers. She asked where she was supposed to go. I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot I'd taken of a nearby hotel website. I'd taken the liberty of checking their availability. They had extended stay rates if she needed more time to make permanent arrangements. She stared at me, like she'd never seen me before in her life. I had this all figured out, she said. I told her one of us had to take charge of the situation. She sat there staring at the divorce papers for what felt like 10 minutes, but was probably closer to 2. I could see her brain working overtime, trying to process that her carefully planned revelation hadn't gone according to her script. This was insane, she finally said. I couldn't just end a 6-year marriage because she was honest with me about having feelings for someone else. I corrected her. I wasn't ending it because she was honest. I was ending it because she was having an affair and calling it a cute name to make herself feel better. She said it wasn't an affair. They hadn't even... She trailed off. I asked her to finish that sentence. They hadn't even what? Slept together? Was that the line she thought actually mattered here? She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. They'd connected emotionally, she said. Sometimes that just happens. I pointed out that it happened while she was married to me, which is generally called cheating, regardless of which specific emotions got involved. She stood up and started pacing around the room. I was being incredibly rigid about this, she said. Relationships evolve over time. People can have meaningful connections with multiple people. I almost laughed. Was she seriously trying to sell me on polyamory right now? She said she was trying to explain that love isn't always neat and simple. When she met David, I leaned back in my chair. So we're giving him a name now. I told her to go ahead and tell me about David. Her face flushed slightly. He was intelligent, funny, easy to talk to. They'd spent hours discussing everything: work, life, dreams, future plans, things we never talked about anymore. I asked when the last time was that she'd tried to have one of those conversations with me. She said that wasn't the point. I told her it was exactly the point. She'd stopped investing in our marriage months ago, found someone new to invest in instead, and now wanted credit for being honest about it. She stopped pacing and faced me directly. She wanted credit for trying to handle this maturely instead of sneaking around behind my back. She'd told me the truth. I pointed out she'd told me after she'd already decided to pursue him. That's not maturity. That's damage control after the fact. She asked if I was really going to throw away everything we'd built together because she had feelings for someone else. I told her I wasn't throwing anything away. She'd already done that. I was just cleaning up the mess she'd made. She walked over to her boxes and opened one, pulling out a framed photo of us from our honeymoon. She asked if I remembered this, remembered how happy we were back then. I said I remembered thinking I was marrying someone who understood what marriage actually meant. She said people change. She wasn't the same person she was 6 years ago. I agreed, clearly not. The person I married wouldn't have started a romantic relationship with someone else and expected me to be understanding about it. She set the photo down and looked at me with something that might have been desperation. What if she ended it? What if she told David this was a mistake and we worked on our marriage instead? I asked if she could really do that, just turn off her feelings for him because I wasn't okay with sharing her. She said if that's what it took to save our marriage, then yes. I studied her face carefully. She didn't mean that. She was just scared because this wasn't playing out how she'd imagined it would. Of course she was scared. She was about to lose her husband over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I asked if she thought I'd misunderstood something about her being in a situationship with David. She said I was overreacting to something that didn't have to destroy us. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Mrs. Anderson from across the street was watering her flowers. Normal evening activities for normal people with normal problems. I asked her a question without turning around. If I'd called her from a business trip and told her I'd met someone, that I was exploring a connection with another woman, how would she have reacted? The silence stretched long enough that I turned back to look at her. That would be different, she said finally. I asked how it would be different. Because I wouldn't do that, she said. I asked why not. According to her own logic, feelings just happen. People connect with others. Relationships evolve naturally. She said I was being ridiculous. I told her I was using her exact logic. If it was okay for her to explore meaningful connections with other people while married to me, why wouldn't it be okay for me to do the exact same thing? She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. I continued, here's what I thought had actually happened. She got bored with our routine. David made her feel excited again, made her feel special. And instead of bringing that energy home to work on us, she decided to keep both options open. Now she was upset because I wasn't playing along with her backup plan. That's not, she started. She'd never thought of me as a backup plan. Then why was she here trying to negotiate instead of in Phoenix with David? If he was such an amazing connection, why wasn't she pursuing that instead of trying to keep me around? Her phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a text message and I could see the name David clearly displayed. She quickly flipped it face down, but I'd already seen it. I observed that he was texting her, probably wondering how the conversation with her husband had gone. She said it wasn't like that. I told her to show me the message then. She said that was private. So were the messages between a husband and wife, I pointed out, but apparently privacy didn't mean much to her anymore. She picked up her phone and clutched it against her chest. She wasn't going to let me invade her privacy just because I was angry. Privacy, interesting concept coming from someone who wanted to maintain romantic relationships with two different men simultaneously, I said. She insisted she never said she wanted to maintain both relationships. I reminded her she'd never said she didn't either. In fact, what she'd specifically said was that she needed time to figure out where things with David might go. That sounded exactly like wanting to keep her options open to me. She slumped back into the chair, looking exhausted. She didn't know what she wanted. This whole situation was confusing for her. I told her it really wasn't that complicated. She wanted David? Go be with David. She wanted to work on our marriage? Cut contact with David and commit to rebuilding what she'd damaged. But she didn't get to have both options. She asked if I would just forget this ever happened, if she chose me. I looked at the divorce papers on the table. I would never forget this. When our marriage got boring, her solution was to start shopping for a replacement. Trust doesn't just magically reappear because someone changed their mind about which option they prefer. Her phone buzzed again. David presumably wondering why she wasn't responding to his first message. The phone buzzed a third time, and I could see her struggling internally with whether to respond or not. Finally, she turned it off completely and set it aside. There. Was I happy now? I told her turning off her phone didn't make David disappear. It just meant she was avoiding the conversation she needed to have with him about whether she was leaving her husband for him or staying married and cutting contact. Basic adult decision-making. She rubbed her temples like she had a headache developing. This was all happening too fast. She needed time to think about everything. I pointed out she'd had 3 days to think. 3 days of romantic dinners and meaningful conversations with David while I was here believing I was in a committed marriage. How much more thinking time did she need? She insisted she wasn't trying to hurt me. I acknowledged that, but said she did hurt me. And now she was trying to minimize that by saying it wasn't intentional, like that somehow changed anything. She looked around the room again, taking in all the empty spaces where her belongings used to be. Where had I put her coffee machine? Box 3, I said, along with all the specialty pods she'd spent $80 on last month. She said she couldn't believe I'd packed everything. It was like she'd never lived here at all. I told her that was precisely the point. She said I was being cruel. I corrected her. I was being efficient. She'd made her choice. I was just helping her follow through with it. She came back and sat down, looking completely defeated. What if she'd made a mistake? What if she was just confused and overwhelmed by everything? Then she'd learn something important about herself, I said. Some people get overwhelmed and talk to their spouse about it. Others start situationships with strangers at conferences. Now she knew which type of person she was. She said I was being cold. I told her there was a difference between being cold and protecting myself. Her phone lit up even though it was turned off. Someone calling persistently enough to trigger the emergency bypass feature. She glanced at it and her expression changed. It was her sister, she said. I told her to answer it. She asked if I minded. I asked why I would mind. Her family was going to find out about this eventually. Might as well start now. She answered on the 4th ring. I could hear her sister's voice through the phone, excited and cheerful about something. Jennifer held the phone away from her ear and looked at me apologetically. She told her sister Amanda that she'd just got home. Actually, Amanda, something had happened. Could she call her back later? More excited chatter from Amanda's end. It was complicated. She'd explain everything later, she promised. She hung up and immediately started typing a text message. I asked if she was letting Amanda know she was getting divorced. She said she was asking if she could stay there tonight. Good plan, I noted. Hotels got expensive long term. She finished typing and set the phone down. Amanda wanted to know what had happened. What should she tell her? I suggested the truth would be a novel approach. She said the truth was complicated. I disagreed. She'd had an affair and I'd filed for divorce. That was the truth. She insisted she didn't have an affair. I asked what she'd call having feelings for someone and acting on those feelings while married to me. She was quiet for a long moment before saying she would call it the biggest mistake of her life. Now we were getting somewhere, I said. Her phone buzzed with a text response from Amanda. She read it and sighed. Amanda said she could stay as long as she needed to, but she wanted the full story tomorrow. I noted that Amanda always was the smart one in her family. Jennifer said her sister was going to ask questions she didn't know how to answer. Like what? Like why she'd thrown away a good marriage for someone she barely knew. That was a fair question, I agreed. What was her answer going to be? She looked at me with something that might have been genuine regret. She honestly didn't know why she'd done this. Maybe because she stopped appreciating what she had and started fantasizing about what she might be missing, I suggested, or maybe because she wanted the excitement of something new without giving up the security of something established. She winced. That made her sound terrible. It made her sound selfish but human, I said. She asked if there was really no way to fix this anymore. I walked over to the table and picked up the divorce papers. She could have fixed it by talking to me when she started feeling disconnected. She could have fixed it by putting energy into our marriage instead of into David. She could have fixed it by coming home and having an honest conversation about problems instead of calling to announce her situationship. But I couldn't fix it now. Now she'd just be choosing me because I wasn't tolerating her other choice. That wasn't fixing anything. That was just settling for her backup plan when her first choice became inconvenient. She started to cry then, quietly but steadily. She'd really screwed this up, hadn't she? Completely, I agreed. And I wasn't going to give her another chance. What would that even look like? Her promising to stop talking to David, me pretending to trust her again, and both of us hoping she didn't meet another exciting stranger at the next conference? She said it wouldn't be like that. I asked how she knew. 3 days ago, she would have said cheating on me wouldn't be like her either. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She was going to regret this for the rest of her life. Probably, I agreed, but that's what consequences were for. She stood up and started loading her things into her car. I helped her carry the boxes, not out of kindness, but because I wanted them gone from my house. With each trip back and forth, the house felt more like mine and less like ours. When we loaded the last box, she turned to me in the driveway. What happened now? Now she figured out her life without me in it, and I figured out mine without her. Whatever happened between her and David was between the two of them. I wasn't part of that equation anymore. She got in her car and rolled down the window. She wanted me to know that she did love me. She still did. I told her I believed her. But love wasn't enough when it came with footnotes and exceptions. She drove away and I stood in the driveway watching her taillights disappear around the corner. After 6 years of marriage, it was over. Just like that, I went inside and locked the new deadbolt. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been for months. Not empty quiet, but peaceful quiet. Like I could finally breathe normally again. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. How did it go? I typed back that it went better than expected and thanked him for the help. He asked if I was okay. I looked around the living room, already mentally rearranging furniture to fill the spaces where her things used to be. Yeah, I typed back. I think I actually am. 3 months later, I was sitting in Robert Hayes' office again, this time for the final signature on the divorce decree. Everything had proceeded smoothly throughout the process. No contested assets, no dragged-out negotiations over who got what. She'd signed everything without argument, which surprised me initially until I realized she was probably eager to make it official so she could move forward with David without the complication of still being married. Robert slid the stamped papers across his desk. That was it. I was officially single again. He asked how it felt as I reviewed the final documents one last time. Like I should have done this months ago, I said, and I genuinely meant it. The last 3 months had been the most peaceful I'd felt in over a year. No more walking on eggshells around her moods and trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. No more wondering why she seemed so distant all the time. No more making excuses for why she didn't seem interested in spending time together anymore. All those red flags I'd been ignoring suddenly made perfect sense in hindsight. I'd thrown myself into work and picked up some hobbies I'd abandoned during our marriage. Started running again 5 mornings a week, learned to cook properly instead of relying on takeout every night. Even painted the living room a color I actually liked instead of the beige compromise we'd settled on years ago. The house felt like my home again. My phone had been mercifully quiet regarding any drama from her end. I'd heard through mutual friends that she and David were officially together now and that she'd moved to Phoenix to be with him. Apparently, the long-distance thing had been too complicated for their situationship, so she'd quit her job here and started fresh out there with him. Amanda had called me exactly once, about 2 weeks after everything happened. That conversation had been interesting. She said she just wanted to understand what had happened because Jennifer's story didn't make much sense to her. I asked what Jennifer had told her. Amanda said Jennifer claimed we'd grown apart and decided to divorce, but that didn't explain why she'd moved to Phoenix or why everything had happened so fast. I gave Amanda the actual facts without editorializing or adding my own commentary. She listened in complete silence, then said quietly that she was really sorry. She'd thought she knew her sister better than that. I told her people surprise us sometimes, just not usually in ways that torpedo their entire life. That was the last I'd heard from Jennifer's family. I assumed they were processing their own disappointment in her choices. Tyler and I were grabbing lunch after I left Robert's office when he asked the question I'd been expecting for months. When was I going to start dating again? Eventually, I said. He pointed out that wasn't really an answer. It was the only answer I had right now, I told him. I wasn't in any hurry to jump back into something serious. He said he wasn't talking about serious relationships. He was talking about getting back out there, meeting people, having some fun with life. I considered this while working on my burger. The truth was, I felt better about myself now than I had in years. More confident, more settled in my own skin, more clear about what I actually wanted from life. But I also wasn't naive enough to think I was ready to trust someone else with my heart just yet. I told Tyler I was good where I was for now, just building my own life again on my own terms. He said that was fair enough, but he warned me not to become one of those guys who swears off women completely because one woman screwed him over. I assured him I wasn't swearing off anything. I was just being selective about who got access to my peace of mind. Tyler nodded approvingly and said, that was actually pretty mature. When I got home that afternoon, there was an envelope in my mailbox with no return address written on it. Inside was a handwritten note from Jennifer. She knew she was probably the last person I wanted to hear from, but she wanted me to know that she and David had broken up last week. Turns out a relationship built on betraying someone else doesn't have the strongest foundation. Who would have thought? She wasn't writing to ask for anything or to try to fix what she'd broken. She just wanted to apologize for being so selfish and short-sighted about everything. I deserved better than what she'd given me, and she hoped I would find someone who appreciated what she'd been too immature to value properly. She hoped I was happy. I read it twice, then put it in the kitchen drawer with other random papers I might need someday but probably wouldn't. I felt absolutely nothing reading it. No satisfaction that David hadn't worked out the way she'd hoped. No temptation to reach out and commiserate with her. No anger about the timing of her newfound clarity. Just nothing, which actually felt like real progress. That evening, I called my mom to let her know the divorce was officially finalized. She'd been supportive throughout the whole process, but I could tell she was disappointed about how things had turned out. She genuinely liked Jennifer, had been looking forward to grandchildren someday, had probably imagined holiday gatherings that would never happen now. She asked how I was doing with all of this. Better than I expected, I told her. Different than I'd planned, obviously, but better than I expected. She said that was good. I should know that she and my father supported whatever made me happy. I thanked her for that. Then she said something that stuck with me. She told me not to let this experience make me cynical about love. What happened with Jennifer said more about her character than it did about marriage or relationships in general. I smiled and promised I wouldn't let it make me cynical. After I hung up, I looked around my living room now, and realized she was absolutely right. I wasn't cynical about love at all. I was just more careful about who I chose to love, and more aware of the actual difference between someone who loved me and someone who loved the idea of me as a convenient backup option. 6 months ago, I thought I was in a solid, stable marriage. Today, I was officially divorced and genuinely okay with it. Life had a funny way of working out when you stopped accepting less than you deserved. I opened a beer and settled in to watch a movie I'd wanted to see for months, but Jennifer had never been interested in. Small freedoms like that, but they added up to something much bigger. They added up to a life that was completely mine again, and that felt pretty good. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Anderson working in her garden like she did most evenings. Normal evening activities for normal people having normal problems. The difference was that now I was one of those normal people again, instead of someone living in denial about his marriage falling apart. It had taken me 34 years to learn that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is refuse to accept unacceptable behavior, even from people you love, especially from people you love. The movie started and I settled back into my couch now, and enjoyed the peace of an evening that belonged entirely to me.